For nearly 2 centuries, Chinatowns have been homes away from home for a lot of Chinese American families, and they provide a safe space for immigrants to establish roots and grow their businesses. But in recent years, they've been on the decline with gentrification and a rise in hate crimes against the Asian community. Many families are worried that their culture could become lost. But our next guest is working to change that. He's giving us a candid look at what it was like growing up in Detroit's Chinatown in his new memoir, Everything I Learned at a Chinese Restaurant. Curtis Chin joins us now in studio. Curtis, it's a pleasure to have you here. I'm married to a Detroiter. I'm excited about this topic. Yeah, look, tell us, what are the lessons that you think people should know? Why did you write this book?
Wow. Well, lessons. The very first lesson that I learned growing up in this Chinese restaurant was, when you're a young kid, oftentimes your parents will say, don't talk to strangers. My parents actually gave us the exact opposite instruction. They said talk to strangers, and who they were talking about were the people sitting in our dining room. Because my mom didn't have a chance to graduate high school. My dad went to community college for 2 semesters. They didn't know what opportunities existed outside of those 4 walls of that Chinese restaurant, but they knew they had a dining room full of people who did. And so anytime my dad met somebody who had a cool job, he'd call all 6 of us kids to go running over to the customers and barrage them with questions of like, what do you do for a living? How did you get your job? How much money did you make? So it's a great experience growing up as a kid in that Chinese restaurant.
What do you think the rest of us can take from that experience? Because I feel like, I'm not from New York, but that's where we are right now. And I don't feel like a lot of people are always ready for those conversations or want to have or invite some of those conversations here. What do you think we can do to sort of inspire that type of
Well, I actually think that's really critical these days because our country is so divided right now. We have these little silos where we don't talk to each other. But Chinese restaurants are actually one of the few places where you can go in and meet somebody from a different race, class, religion. And if you just took the opportunity to have a small conversation like, oh, what are you ordering? What are you eating? Maybe these are the small steps that we need to take as a country to start repairing these, fences that we have built up against each other.
I'm really interested to hear you say those divisions between race and class, because we've seen an increase in hate crimes against Asian Americans, against Muslim Americans, against Jewish Americans. What do you think that people, especially in those communities that have been marginalized and targeted, frankly, in the past few years, should take from this lesson in this moment?
Well, I'm an eternal optimist. I feel like our country is going through these very difficult times, having these difficult but important conversations about racism, homophobia, anti-Semitism, and whatnot. But I figure we've got to do this in a way that actually brings us together. And so the way I talked about my book, with my friends was, come for the egg rolls, but stay for the talk on racism. Because we've got to be able to have, a frame of reference. And food oftentimes does that. Food literally brings people to the table. And so let's start with that, Let's start with something that puts us at ease, puts us in comfort, brings good memories. And then once we build up that trust level, maybe that's when we can begin to have these discussions. But right now, sadly, it seems like we don't even trust each other.
Speaking of trust, a big portion of this story was your coming out story. Tell us about that.
Coming out to my Buddhist Asian family was really kind of challenging, I will say. But fortunately, my family was great about it. We don't have certain concepts of heaven and hell. But still, I think I stayed in the closet a bit more because I was so concerned about not disappointing my parents. I knew how much they had sacrificed for me and my siblings. And I think that's one thing about a lot of immigrant families is that the kids really, really just want to make their parents happy. And so for me, that's what I did. My whole focus growing up was really just, how can I make my parents feel that their sacrifices they were making for us was worth it?
Making them feel proud. I mean, I think that's so important that you touched on that so that so many other readers can feel connected to your story. Curtis Chin, thank you for joining us in studio. We really appreciate this, and I love the lessons that you shared. There's more NBC News Daily ahead.